not long ago, I was having a meeting with a bunch of young people that I'm working with on a project, and 4 or 5 of them, all Italians, sidled up to me at the end of the session and said, "We're embarrassed to tell you this, but what we really like to drink is Recioto, which is the sweet red wine from Valpolicella."
I'm Wendy Holloway, and you're listening to the Flavor of Italy podcast, sharing the very best of Italian food and wine, lifestyle, and people. This is Wendy Holloway with the Flavor of Italy podcast. I'm here with Cynthia Chaplin, who you all know. She's my dear friend and wine guru. And of course, as always, I'll put links to all the amazing things she does in the show notes. But I was curious about what's going to happen with wine in 2026, because lots of things have changed. So we've gotten through this dry January almost, which I never personally pay any attention to. But we're getting out of that. So let's talk about what are some of the trends going to be. I've read and seen some things, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, first of all, dry January for me means Chablis.
Right.
So I completely get that. And I feel that it would be a disservice to my industry if I did dry January at the moment. So that's not my radar. But the news for 2026 is positive so far, which is really great because we've had a couple of years of a lot of bad news with tariffs and people not drinking as much, and some health warnings that were contradictory and very drastic in what they said. So a lot.
Crazy 2025.
Yeah. Really. So a lot of those things have been walked back. The U.S. Health Department is now saying a glass of wine a day is perfectly fine. No one's going to die. So yes, the news for 2026 is good. We see a lot of things on the rise. When we're talking about Italy in particular, things like Prosecco are on the rise. We've got lots of interesting things happening. We've definitely suffered from the tariffs in the USA. Up until the tariffs came into play, 43% of all Italian wine sold was sold in the USA. So it took.
Oh, wow. Okay. Big number.
So it took a lot of adaptation to get used to that. And the wineries in Italy are fantastically stepping up to the plate and adapting. So we have a lot to talk about. The low, no alcohol thing, young people's approach to wine drinking, but also fine wine collectors are very happy at the moment with Italian wines because they've held their value and their prices haven't gone up in the extreme. Italian fine wines are the lowest, the least expensive in the world, but also some of the longest lived. So we've got some really positive things coming this year.
Yeah, that's all good. So I read that just personally, I've kind of moved away from really heavy wines, the heavy reds. That's just been even last year and the year before, and I've moved more towards rosé. Okay, and this is my show and tell. It's a Tintiglia from Molise.
Fantastic.
A wonder. Yeah, and I bought some down in Molise last year, and I got more this year. It's just something I could drink with anything and all day long. And then along with that, chillable reds.
Yeah. We've talked about chillable reds in the past.
Yeah, we have.
A global trend. And it makes sense when you think about it. Global warming is a thing. I don't care what anybody says. And people don't want to drink 16% alcohol. So all of the winemakers who are paying attention to trends are looking to lower their alcohol. So we're seeing, even wines that are known for high alcohol, Amarone, Brunello, Barolo, things like that. We're seeing younger and more forward-thinking producers in those very famous areas working hard to lower the amount of oak they use and to keep their alcohol by volume a bit lower than it has been in the past. We're seeing things like, as you said, instead of people drinking Amarone, they're looking at a Valpolicella Classico. Same grape, lighter style, made in steel, no oak. It does not age as well, but it certainly costs a lot less. You can chill it. It's very pairable with food. Same thing with Brunello. People are drinking less of that and more of a Chianti Classico, the modern style ones that aren't using oak as much as in the past. Rufinat.
Why do you think that is, the move away from oak? Because it's still drinking wine, and it's a kind of a change in flavor profile
It's
preferences.
two
But
things.
from what?
Yeah, it's two things. As it from in my opinion, it's 98% consumer driven. People don't want to have those oaky, smoky, toasty, spicy, very alcoholic wines as much as they used to in the past. Uh, Consumers are looking for interesting native grapes from interesting regions that have a lot of history, and many of those grapes don't handle oak well. So that's part of it. But oak is also expensive, extremely expensive.
Yeah,
In
of
Italy,
course.
we do not produce very much oak, so most of the oak in Italy comes from the US or France or Slovenia, and it's expensive. It's one of the single most expensive parts of winemaking. So um, it makes sense that people will be looking to do other things. We've also got technology. We're using a lot of cement tanks now to get a micro oxygenation that oak would give us, but we don't get any smoky spiciness. It's very neutral. So we end up with these wines that have this lovely structure and sort of really cool feeling on your palate, but none of that spiciness, none of that heaviness that oak can bring. And they still will age well. So technology is helping us out a lot as well too. And people are just looking for different things. Some of the classic regions are coming back to the forefront. People want a good story, but they want a fresher, more modern wine style. That's why white wines and rosé wines are going up much,
Yeah,
much
yeah.
more, and red wine sales are definitely dropping, particularly the aged oaked, very alcoholic styles that have been popular in the past. Those are coming down a bit. Bordeaux has had a lot of problems, as we all know. People are looking for different kinds of things. They're looking to Pinot Noir, so Burgundy's going up. They're looking for things from Italy that are the same sort of thing. Again, a Valpolicella Classico, or a Barbera instead of a Barolo. These sorts of
Yeah.
changing up what people are drinking. There's a lot of curiosity now. I think wine communicators, I know myself as an educator and a communicator and a marketing person, we're learning to talk about wine in a way that is much more accessible to people in general. Nobody wants to hear me talk about,
Yeah, the
yeah,
snobby, yeah,
exactly, the acidity and the
out.
tannins and that. So it has,
Yeah,
which is great because it has allowed me to be much more creative in the way that I talk about wine and teach wine and describe wine. And people are looking for something that really appeals to their lifestyle, that makes sense to them. We're in a very competitive atmosphere at the moment too, because
yeah.
people are looking at other kinds of drinks, and especially this low and no alcohol situation, which can't be ignored. I don't know, how long it will be as big of a trend, but it's still certainly a trend now. Um, we've got, low alcohol beer, low alcohol spirits. Mocktails are a big thing. Rome and Milan now have bars that serve only low and no alcohol and mocktails. Things like
Though Italy's always been, excuse me, they've had great bitter flavor profile
Yeah.
drinks that are no alcohol or very close to it. And Italians love that. And they kind of got away and followed the American heavy, intense cocktail thing, but they're moving
Yeah,
from
it's
it.
coming back, and it, the Italian government made a step in the right direction. Originally, they dug their heels in and said, "We're not going to let wineries or spirits companies produce no and low alcohol in the same places." They changed that, and
Yeah.
big companies. When you look at places like Pernod Ricard, have really adapted. They're coming out with I think it's a zero alcohol gin, but things that are very traditional in Italy, these botanical driven things, amaros, vermouth, all of those sorts of things that are not fortified, that have slightly lower alcohol by volume in general, and can be topped up with sparkling water and served over ice. These things are becoming really interesting to people once again in a way that they were, sort of 70, 80 years ago. So people are getting back to, there's this, the well-being and health and self-care has finally really arrived in Italy, which it hadn't until recently. And people are very interested in what they're putting in their body. They want, drinks that are coming from sustainable, organic places. They don't want chemicals. They don't want a lot of alcohol. And the Italian producers.
I've read even that people are looking for wine in like paper containers rather than that the sustainability thing is really entrenched in our head. And
That,
that's a good thing. I don't know how I feel about.
well, it's interesting. So, in the U.S., Maker is a big, fine wine conglomerate brand, and they've just done a deal with one of the big airlines serving, fine wines in cans on airlines. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about this either, but
Oh,
obviously,
ouch.
well, they're going to be consumed quickly. They're not going to be sitting in someone's, cellar for.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
there's a
right.
time and a place for it. Italy, I think, will be the very last place on earth that still produces wine in bottles that weigh 3 kilos, because Italians are very, very devoted to heavy dark glass, even when it's not necessary. So I'm thrilled to see
Correct.
your sparkling rosé Tintiglia, because when Tintiglia is vinified as a red wine, it is one of those bastions of, older producers who put it in,
Yeah,
glass
yeah.
bottles, and it's very heavy and very alcoholic. So I had the opportunity to spend some time in Calabria not long ago, and that's the newest DOCG. They just got a DOCG in October, so Italy's newest one. And Calabria is also known for, very heavy reds. They have spicy food there, and they have heavy reds that make the food taste even spicier. Um, the DOCG is for Chiro, which is a place, and the grape is Galioppo. And while I was down there, I tasted so many rosé Galiopos, some brilliant lighter alcohol, more steel, less oak, wonderful producer called Librandi doing some amazing modern work. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
fun.
an
Yeah.
experimental vineyard that's like a spiral circle. Wonderful to see these really compelling things. And there were some young influencers from various countries on this trip, and they were fascinated by this. And we need this. So, telling a story that's interesting, that brings people who don't necessarily drink wine into the culture and into the whole sort of seductive side of what can be happening in the Italian countryside that ends up in your glass. These are all really important. This is one of the trends, telling the story better. And I think that's,
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
yeah.
And then you mentioned Southern Italy, and I've from things I've been reading, that's an area of wine producing that's kind of trending.
Well, yeah, Sicily has been in the swing for years. Etna has really come to the forefront in the past 10 years
Oh
with a
yeah.
lot of Etna. Used to be almost all reds. Now it's 50-50 whites and reds. And the whites are really gaining ground. I think we will see them overtake the reds. Very ageable, both the reds and the whites. They're gaining, a lot of interest globally. They're going up in price on the global market. And there are some fun, cool, young winemakers on Etna and across Sicily who really want to tell the story of their native grapes. Sicily is where winemaking in Italy started. This is where the native grapes came through from Greece and the Phoenicians and all of these things. So they've got
Yeah.
loads of
Yeah.
them. And people doing cool things. A recent trip, another one in 2025, was to Marsala. Now, you and I think of Marsala as the old school, fortified wine, much of it sweet, that our grandparents had. Not so anymore, my friend. They are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was going to ask you exactly about Marsala because apparently that's like really a trending wine to drink and of course use in the kitchen, but who would have thought?
Well, use in the kitchen is kind of out the window with that because they're doing some great
Yeah.
things. Aging it, fortifying it less, keeping it dry. Um, really, really interesting things. And we're so lucky because the three masters of wine who are from Italy, they are best friends, and one of them is from Marsala, and that's
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Pietro Russo. And so they bought a small vineyard uh, in Marsala, in Salina, right on the
The three of them together. Fun. Fun.
right on the salt flats. It is at sea level. It is an incredible vineyard, very old vines, and they are growing Grillo, which is the grape used for the most part in Marsala, and they are vinifying it bone dry, super fresh. Their winery is called Ufficio del Vento, the Office of the Wind, because
Oh,
it's very
nice.
windy there. But they've started a project
Mhm.
called Salt West, and they have gathered together, I think it's 6 or 8 now, maybe 10 local small producers of Grillo white grapes. And they are supporting them, educating them, getting them to, all their vineyards are very tiny. These are small little parcels, and getting them to do, do their viticulture in an organic way, in a sustainable way, to make their wines really clean, bone dry, very refreshing, high acid with this saline note. It's a really cool thing, and they have an amazing story. They're the Ufficio del Vento, their wine has the windmill on it. That is the iconic thing of Salina. So they're
Yeah.
taking an ancient story of Marsala and bringing it smack bang into the future with the same grapes vinified in a different way. And that's happening a lot around Italy now. As I said, in Calabria, there was a lot of rosé in Ciro, which never used to be that way. It was always a very dark red wine from Galliopo. In fact, it was the wine that was always given to Olympic athletes. So when the Olympics were held in Rome in 1960, they gave all the athletes a bottle. So I'm wondering if they're going to do this
Oh,
in
wow.
Cortina
Yeah.
this year. But a lot of sparkling, again, not just Prosecco, but other sparkling. Young people and people who are new to wine, they like to drink sweet wine. So bizarrely, sweet wine and sparkling sweet and semi-sweet wine is on an uptick in Italy. There was just recently a wonderful woman in the U.S., Deborah Parker Wong. She did a big survey of wine students at San Jose University in California, and most of them had absolutely no experience in wine because, of course, you can't drink in the US before you're 21. And they did these wine courses, which are quite serious, degree courses. And she surveyed them all afterwards. And what wine did they like? What did they not like? Did they find something they'd never heard of? How did it go? Kind of a thing. And they all were far more curious and wanted to continue more than she thought they would. But one of the outstanding reds that many of them named as a surprise and that they want to drink for the rest of their life was Brachetto, which is a sparkling, sweet red wine from Piemonte.
Oh,
Yep,
wow.
yep, very interesting.
Interesting.
And not long ago, I was having a meeting with a bunch of young people that I'm working with on a project, and 4 or 5 of them, all Italians, sidled up to me at the end of the session and said, we're embarrassed to tell you this, but what we really like to drink is Recioto, which is the sweet red wine from Valpolicella. And you have to smile. And I said, well, this is great. How are you drinking it? They drink it cold. So it used to be served room temperature and people dunked their Christmas cookies in it. They drink it cold and they're turning it into cocktails. They're taking Recioto, pouring in some Prosecco, stirring it up with a branch of rosemary. And there is this sort of sweet thing. The most Prosecco that's sold in the world is extra dry, not brut. So one step down from brut. So more sugar, slightly sweeter. So sweet fizzy wines and semi-sweet fizzy wines are a big trend at the moment, which is I find fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
I think people are feeling a little bit less self-conscious about admitting what they really like. And I know myself when I'm working particularly in Asia or with groups of more mature drinkers, people who've been drinking wine for a long time, they will often say that their favorite wine is Sassicaia or something like that. And then when you actually get talking to them or blind tasting with them, that's not what they like at all. They're just embarrassed to admit publicly what they actually really like. Young people and new consumers are not embarrassed. They don't have that problem. So they're not self-conscious, which is wonderful. So we have this great
Yeah. So they're not on this whole the great wine elitist sort of a
what I
thing.
call buying labels rather than buying the wine that you actually want to drink. No,
Yeah, exactly.
they're totally unself-conscious about saying what they like and what they don't like. There is a lot more curiosity in wine drinking in general right now. People also do not have enough money, um, so they don't. There's a lot of wine in the world, too much really. A lot of it is very, very expensive. A lot of it is very, very inexpensive and terrible. So the trend for 26 seems to be drink less, but drink better. So instead of, drinking a lot of sort of average wine, only drinking maybe once or twice a week and drinking something that's a little bit better, a little more expensive, maybe a little more interesting, a little better made. And people are drinking a lot more wine at home because it's too darn expensive to go out to a restaurant now.
Yeah.
And drinking at home also is great because people can be curious. They're not stuck to a wine list in a restaurant, which we all know has a huge percentage tacked onto it. So they're more curious about trying things at home where nobody's going to judge them. And e-commerce is a big deal. They are buying their wine online.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think in many ways that is a good thing because supermarket wine buying is a minefield. You don't know what you're getting, you don't know how long it's been there. Far too much choice. It's overwhelming if you don't really have that much experience. And online e commerce, they give you a description, they tell you a story. This is, again, the power of storytelling in wine.
Yeah, you read reviews. Yeah.
And I think this is really going to change the way that people drink wine in the next couple of years. It's very interesting to watch. So, definitely more whites than reds. Of course, what reds they want, as you said, chillable. A lot more rosé, which makes me happy as always.
Of
And
course.
Italians, finally, especially younger ones, are no longer embarrassed to be seen with a bottle of rosé in their household, which wasn't true even 5 years ago. So I'm happy about that. But using grapes that used to be, 100% for red wine and using them now for rosé, as your Tintilia is a perfect example of that. Yeah,
Exactly.
I've seen so many great ones. Again, I had the Galioppo and Maliocco, these really ancient grapes from Calabria, as beautiful rosés. A lot of interesting things being done. I think producers who have only red wine vineyards, they're doing a lot of what we call a Blanc de Noir, a white wine made from a red grape. which used to be specifically Pinot Nero for Champagne. Now, a lot of producers in Italy are taking their red grapes, including things like Nebbiolo and stuff like that, and making
Mm.
white wine from those grapes. And it's fascinating. You get this wonderful, interesting texture, really interesting smells, and far less alcohol, far less heat. Very drinkable, pairable wines that cost a lot less money. So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So I guess there are so many kind of young and creative winemakers. They start to do different things with grapes that were always used in a certain way, and they're turning that upside down.
Well, and you have to, if you're in this industry, very rarely does anybody get rich and famous making wine. So you have to keep your eye on the trends, on the sales, things like this, and they are seeing this happen. And so, if you have just taken over your father's winery and you've got 10 hectares of red grapes and you know that people are drinking white and rosé, you think to yourself, aha, what am I going to do here? So
Right.
it's, necessity is the mother of invention, but people are getting wise to really looking at their consumers instead of trying to tell consumers what they should do. They're listening to what consumers would like to try, and it's making a big impact. And I'm very very happy to see this happening. It's creative. It will keep the wine industry going. It will bring the fine wine drinkers and collectors of the future
Mhm.
to the party if they get interested now. So yeah, it's something that's making me very very happy to see.
So before we close, and I always ask you this, do you have some specific wines that you would like to suggest?
Oh, let's see.
And I guess maybe thinking, since most of the Flavor of Italy listeners are US based and English language, ones that are easy to
Yep,
get. Easy enough to
yep,
get,
for sure.
let's say.
Well, I have to say, I am a big, huge, gigantic fan of Lambrusco. And yes, Lambrusco went through a terrible reputational problem in the 70s. It was all sweet and it was all bad and it was canned and it was terrible. But Lambrusco, there are 5 different grapes in Lambrusco. They are not all the same. There's a rosé version called
Yeah.
Sorbara. This is making massive headway everywhere in the States, in the UK. It's pink, fizzy. It can be dry, but it can also be off dry. And Lambrusco itself, that deep purple, fizzy, just tastes like grape juice, the most delicious wine. I do not know a single person who, if you put a glass of dry, fizzy Lambrusco in front of them, they don't go, wow, never thought this would be so good.
Well, I would be one of those. So, do you have a specific one to suggest? Because I suppose there's
Yes, I do.
a lot of variety.
There is a lot of variety. There are some very big commercial producers, and of course, there's a place for that. But if you really want to try some quality Lambrusco and really see the difference between these different grapes, my favorite of the favorite is Lini, Lini 910, and their company is Lini 910 because it started in 1910. So it's Lini 910.
So, and this particular wine within that company is called what?
Well, they make Lambrusco, and they make 4 different levels of Lambrusco.
So you would go for any of
Go for any of
theirs.
them. My personal favorite is made from the Lambrusco Salamino grape, easy to remember because it's like salami. The wine is sort of salami colored. It's drier. It's more tart. It's not as fruity. But the Sorbara, the pink one that I always my girls remember it because it sounds like sherbet. So Sorbara is the pink one, and Grasparosa is the big purpley one. And Lini does an entry level portfolio of those with these great labels with a laughing Bacchus
Oh,
on the
nice.
front,
Yeah.
and then their labeling is great. It's Lini 910. It's not a funny font. It says Lambrusco. And some are off dry, some are dry, some are brut. They do a wonderful champagne style one made with my Salamino, my favorite one, that is aged,
Huh.
just the same way that a champagne would be made. So you can get Lambrusco everywhere now, and it's really something that I think opens the door to wine drinking for people because it is just gluggable. You cannot not love it. You pick it up and it goes with every food. I prefer the dry ones. So
Yeah, I'm with you on
I would
that.
the scary word in Lambrusco is amabile, and amabile means it's sweet. So don't get amabile. But Lambrusco, yeah, that's one of my favorite things, and I love to force it on people when they come over for Sunday lunch, and you see people look at me like, who are you? Well, how can you?
Lambrusco,
But
no.
it is always all gone by the time they leave. So Lambrusco is one. I like looking around at other sparkling wines. When everybody knows how much I love rosé, so I've been talking about various different rosés from all kinds of grapes. Rufina, I would say, in Tuscany. So Rufina is part of Chianti. It's just a little north of Florence, and it has its own denomination now. It's a little higher, so it's lighter, brighter, a little higher acidity, and they make a lovely light style red and some great rosé coming from there. Really tart and sort of cranberry and pink grapefruit and sea salt, really delicious. But sparkling wise, so I live in Veneto, and the sparkling wine that is really coming forward now is Lessini Dorello. So Lessini are the hills between Valpolicella and Venice, and Dorello is the grape. So Lessini Dorello is a sparkling wine. It's been produced for hundreds and hundreds of years. One single grape can be champagne style or can be tank method like Prosecco. And it is crunchy and minerally and like herbal sea salts. When you get those bath salts that have rose, it's
Yeah.
like that with a lemon twist on the top of it. It is grown-up people Prosecco, and it is super good. Again, being exported now to Australia, to the States, to the UK and Canada. So those are some of the ones that I think are going to become more and more attractive to new
Yeah,
drinkers.
these are great ideas, great
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah.
This is great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, happy drinking in a brand new way,
Yes,
let's say.
happy 2026. I'm really thrilled to be feeling the positivity in the wine world right now. Let's hope it carries on this way.
You've been listening to the Flavor of Italy podcast. Find us at www.flavorofitaly.com and on Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and LinkedIn, always as Flavor of Italy.